G'day everyone, welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to be working through all these points here. For those that are new here, my name is Kerry, a woodturner from Brisbane, Australia. In the last video, I showed you how to second turn a bowl and a few things that were going on in the workshop. And these videos are predominantly designed where I'll just turn the cameras on and show you the rough and raw sort of the process of what I go through in getting bowls out or whatever I'm up to in the workshop in sort of the production phase, hence the title's production run. And I just spat everywhere. So we're going to work through those points whilst the oil is settling in on the bowl, because in this video I'm going to show you how I go about wet sanding or sanding and then wet sanding. So I'll put this down, but I'll work through all the previous points videos that I forgot to mention when the oil's on. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, makes sense to me. Anyway, woodcut tools set me out a heap of pure tung oil to use in this video. So we'll use that in wet sanding, which I haven't done before, but I have done all the other bowls. See over there, all those bowls have been wet sanded with this tung oil. And I wanted to do that before filming this video because I wanted a little bit more information up my sleeve about wet sanding with tung oil, because I haven't seen anyone do it before. And I love wet sanding because, as you can imagine, in that last grit, you just want to get it off the lathe, but you can put that first coat of oil on, take it off, and then let it sit over there and let it do its thing and dry out. First thing I want to talk about, and we'll get to the steel wool in just a second, is sanding. And sanding in general, for me, is a bit of therapeutic time. I get to put the music on, dust collection on, and I just work through the bowls and get them done. For most people, I notice that it is an absolute pain in the ring, and it can be. What I've experienced is there's torn grain when you get to your second last grit. So you get to 240 grit or 320 grit and there's torn grain still, or you got railway track marks, you got lines all over your bowl, and yes, it's a pain. I'm going to try and hopefully remedy that and show you what I do. And I'm no expert. I'm just going to show you what I've learnt, and hopefully that will help you out along your wood turning journey. So let's get stuck into that. So the first thing that I want to cover is you want to get the best possible finish off your tools before you step and set up for sanding. So, and what I mean by that is have really razor sharp tools on your last cuts, on your last sort of trimming cuts. And for me, I've found that cuts a heck of a lot of time out when you're sanding. I have the tools razor sharp, I have them honed with the leather wheel on the flute. And what I mean by that is take this bowl gouge, for example. I hone up there in the flute sharp with a leather wheel as well. I do that with the woodcut bowl gouges as well. I get the leather wheel in there and hone the inside of the flute, and I use a combination of the CBN wheels, and I also use, there is a Tormek over the back here. Hold on, I'll use this guy here. Tormek on the bench just there, so I use that as well. So that's how I go about getting a really sharp edge on the gouges. Once I'm happy with that, I then get the next bowl and sand it or get ready to turn it and get the best possible finish I can. So I've sanded this up to 320 grit with the rotary sander. And now my process for sanding is using a leather drill. Using a drill. It's got leather strap on the mind, leather strap. I use a drill. And how I go about doing that is I have either attachment, and I've made a whole separate video on my sanding process that I'll link in the description. And also, if I forget to link videos in the description, someone in the comments, please just let me know that Kezza, where's that video you said you'd mention in the video to put in the description. So just make sure someone does that for me, keeps me accountable. So I've got a 3-inch power head sander and a 2-inch power head sander, and I tend to use the 3-inch, the big guy, on the back of the bowls. So I work the back of the bowls with the 3-inch, and the 2-inch goes on the inside and the rim. I power sand, so I use a drill. I have that in there, ready to go, and I work the drill close by my side, holding it, and I work the bowl in opposites. So the bowl spins that way, and the drill spins the opposite way, and I just work the side of it. I use the top portion of the power head, and I try not, you can see that edge is quite crisp. I don't roll the edges over. If I've made an edge, I try and keep that edge as best as possible. If not, I get one of my little sanding discs and I fold it and then work it by hand and try not to roll the edge as much as I can. When it comes to the inside, the biggest thing that I've always experienced, this is another reason for these videos, is to bring up all the little pain points that I've experienced in trying to get heaps of bowls done in one hit or whatever I do. Torn grain will always be in the end grain. So torn end grain. You could think of something funny about that. I always find that the torn grain is in the end grain and I start there first. I tend to go really light-handed, but I have the lathe stopped and I just work that end grain really quick and then I flick it around like so, and then I work that end grain there like that. I do it quite lightly with about 120 grit, if that, 180 grit. When it comes to grits, I try and hope this process is working well for you. If you have experienced a lot of torn grain and you've tried your heart out to try and get it and it's getting disheartening, just stop and then take care of the torn grain when it comes to sanding. Start with 80 grit sandpaper and work your way up the grits, no more than 50%. You've probably all heard of that before. So 80 grit, 120, 180, 240, and then I go to a rotary sander for 320, but very lightly. Sometimes I don't even use it. And this is by U-Butte Polishers, a company here in Australia. They make all the shellacs. You might have seen it before. The E Ultra Shine with the flex in it that brings up an absolute beautiful shine. But you have to go at higher grits to sort of use that product, which in turn, when you do sand with a really high grit, say you go right up to like 1200, you'll notice that the product that you're sanding starts to build up its own real shine to it. So you're closing the grain over. For myself, if that's what you want to do, fill your boots. But for myself, because I'm using oil products, which I'll tell you why I like using oil in a sec, to cover the bowl, and I want that oil to really penetrate deeply into the pores of the timber, into the fibers. So I only go up to 240 or 320 grit, and then I wet sand with 600 grit sandpaper. And that's just how I go about doing things. So once I've worked my way up through the grits, up to 240 grit, I then stop in, I forgot to mention, in between the grits, this is a bit of controversial topic, I use an air compressor. I use that to blow the bowl out in between grits. So I have my 10 horsepower dust extractor running and then it just rips the dust straight down the pipe. If that misses any and there's some buildup in dust in the environment around me, my in-room air filter picks that up as well. And I made a video about all my safety stuff that I use. My Versaflow's out of action, as you all know. The little battery charger port nearly caught on fire or was smouldering away over there. So what I've been using a half-mast respirator, and that's been taking care of it whilst I wait for the battery charger holder to come back. So in between grits, I blow it out. That sucks it up. If anything gets missed, that in-room air filter picks it up. And I'm wearing my respirator at the same time, so I feel like I'm quite covered in that sense. I do that because sometimes if, say, for example, you go from 120 grit to 180 grit and you're finding that there's just some fine little marks happening. It doesn't happen all the time, but I've noticed in the past, little flecks from the sandpaper pad can come off and go into your bowl and stay within the bowl dust, in the bowl, and you're continuing to sand. And I've noticed when I go to the next grit, it's not removing the previous grit's scratch marks and there's some lines starting to appear. When I do blow the bowl out and I get rid of all the dust and anything that's inside of it, I find that I get a better finish for myself. I have used a brush before where I get like a really soft brush and I sort of brush the bowl out. It works, but I don't think it works as well as the air compressor does. I just forgot something that I wanted to tell you too. Not only that, when I am sanding, I have these all going. Other equipment that I use is good light. So I have my workshop light shining in on there. What was that? Okay, it was my brush. Oh, I thought it was my gouge. I always make sure I've got that workshop light shining right in there, and you can see if you've missed anything or if you've seen some scratch marks from the previous grit are still there and you need to keep going. Or sometimes you might notice that your sanding pad is starting to get a bit of gunk on it. Don't just flick it off and throw it in the bin. What I do is give it another life. I hold the drill by my side, and this is a rubber cleaning stick. You might see them when they used belt sanders and stuff. So I hold it close by myself, hold the rubber cleaning stick on it. That was a really poor example, and I was in the army, so anyway. And that gives it another life, and then I give it another hit, and then I throw it out. So I try and not save as much sandpaper as I can, but I am quite like, if I can't feel like it's cutting anymore, I either give it a clean or I flick it in the bin. I don't waste my time. I just move on and grab another one. And I carry all my sandpaper in a big case. So I've got all my sandpaper in an organised case here, like so. And then I just leave it in the case. I just pick out the ones that I need and then close the case up, because I've left it open before and it's got full of shavings. And then that just normally sits under there. Full of chocolate block under there. And that's how I store all my sandpaper. When it comes to using the power head sander as well, don't spend too much time in the middle, because if you do that, you'll end up in a divot, a little dot right in the center. So when I'm moving, turn the lathe down, so the lathe's right down, I move across the bowl and then I go in the center and then back out, in the center and then back out. I never spend long periods of time in one spot. If you don't have a drill and you are hand sanding, just be careful when you are hand sanding. This is how I cut my sandpaper as well. So we've got this bit of sandpaper here. I fold it over. You can fold it over again. And then all I do is run the cut up one line there, like so. Fold one bit over, and then the other bit over again, and that saves from wearing out any of the abrasive. When I'm hand sanding, which you'll see soon, I hold my right hand over my left, or left over your right, whichever one you feel comfortable. Maybe when you work in the back, you hold your left, and then just work it across, but continuously move the sandpaper. I've noticed in the past, if I hold the sandpaper on one spot for too long, you'll get those railway lines, the track marks, and you'll kick yourself, because then you just got to work it more. And just continuously move your hands. Move your hand when you're sanding. If you feel comfortable just holding it on there, but just your safety is your responsibility, as you're probably well aware. Rotary sander, when it comes to the rotary sander, I simply just work it on one top portion. You can turn these in reverse if you want. So hopefully you can spin them in reverse, and it's simply you just hold the bottom of the sander down. If you want to spin it the other way, you just hold the top down. I don't know what the advantage is of spinning in reverse. You might want to look tricky in front of your friends. I find I get a really good finish. For example, if I'm working up to 240 grit and I notice the finish isn't as normal or as good as a finish as it's normally getting, jeez. If I'm using 240 grit and I'm about to finish the bowl off and I notice that the 240 grit is leaving a few marks and I just want to improve the overall finish, I got the feeling, like I can do better than that, I use the rotary sander, but I don't use it for long. I just hold it on there for a little while and it just works with the bowl. So it doesn't force abrasive onto it. The power of the power head sander isn't forcing an abrasive onto it. This works in motion with the bowl. Righto, so let's do some wet sanding. I'm just going to put that tray down there, get my wet sanding tray. Alrighty, so I'm setting up for wet sanding and I'll have to put my face shield on. So we'll get that sorted. So I'm about to start wet sanding this bowl. I've blown it all out with my air compressor to get all the dust out, any debris that was in there before. So that's all been removed, right? I then get a tray like so. You've all probably seen that tray before. I've got this little dish and I found these little food dishes where one side you might have your greens and the other side you got your spud and meat or whatever. So I've got the tung oil in there. Like I said, pure tung oil from Woodcut Tools. Thank you, Woodcut Tools, for sending it out to me. I've never used it before, but I'm pretty happy with the results so far. So it's looking really nice. It's leaving a nice sort of satin finish on the bowls. But it does take quite some time to dry. That's the only thing that I've noticed when I've used it. In comparison to using other products, normally within 24 hours I can put another coat on, but I'm waiting a little bit longer with these. Doesn't bother me too much because it just gives me more time to do other stuff and talk to you guys. I've got a couple of rags here, one to buff the oil. I've got one to put the oil on, and here it is, and one to take the bowl off. I just normally keep a few rags at hand, so I'm never out of clean rags. I've got 600 grit wet and dry sandpaper here, and I've cut it like I've shown you before, so the abrasive isn't going to rub. And then I'll get through these points that I missed in the last video, some good points there that I wanted to talk about. So I'm just going to dip the oil on. I couldn't find any gloves, but this stuff's super safe, and it doesn't have any accelerators or thinners, or I forgot the proper name that they call it. So I'm just going to rub that in, and you'll notice that the end grain particularly will soak it up, but you don't want to put heaps on because then it can get a little bit blotchy. It's only what I've noticed anyway. But you want to give it a good coat of oil, and you'll know when it's dry. And I'm going to show you how to put this on, wet sand it, and how to apply the second and third coat, which is just the same. And then we'll put it on the back. Put it on the back there. Work it in, and you'll notice there'll be areas, and this stuff, the consistency is like, it's like honey. It's super thick. I believe that's when you know you've got pure tung oil, when it's got a very thick consistency. When it comes to, I've used tung oil in the past, and the consistency hasn't been like this. It was quite thin, so it's probably got like, you know, a couple of % of tung oil, where I believe this is pure tung oil. So I've just noticed on the inside here, there's a little bit where I've got to get a bit more in there. Just in that little undercut rim there. But I mean, you could take that off. You could not even you don't even have to wet sand that. You could take it off the lathe, grab your next bowl and oil it up. But what we're going to do, I'm going to let that sit there and just soak in for a little bit whilst I cover those points from the previous video. Difficult parts that I've experienced in the past is trying to do one thing at a time, and it really hampered me in doing stuff. So what I do now, and what I've done for a little while now, is work in sequences. So I will turn all the backs. So if you missed the previous video, go back and check what I'm talking about. I'll turn all the backs off and then put them aside. And then I'll set up to do all the inside. And that's how I go about doing things. I do all one thing and then set up for the next thing and then do all that. So sand them all, put them all aside, let the room get clean with the in-room filter, and then set up for wet sanding, and then wet sand them all in sequence. So I know what stage every bowl is at any given time. Shapes. So this is the bowl actually from the previous video. It's kind of but you see how, can you see how I've kept that very similar shape? Because I know that's what works. It's an easy, replicatable shape for myself that I really like. And at the beginning, I struggled a lot with shape, and I'm like, oh, how do I go about making a good shape and all the rest of it? And one rule that I always try and follow is that the overall diameter is the size divided by 3 is the size of your foot. So 1/3 of the overall diameter of your bowl should be the foot. And that allows you, reason being, and I know that some people out there don't like following this concept, but for me anyway, it just took the guesswork out, and I just go 1/3 overall diameter is the foot. And when you turn, you know, you're turning hundreds of bowls, you don't have to think about it, because it's just, you're not trying to chop and change different shapes for different things. The process is all the same. And then you learn, then I learned, I knew what worked for me. That allows me to get a nice little cut, a nice little ogee just in there, and it sweeps up and then tucks up at the rim, and so it tucks up at the rim, sorry, went the other way, tucks up at the rim and then folds out, and that allows someone to just hold that bowl with their thumb latched over, and it's just such a nice, comfortable feeling in my hands. And when I see other people pick them up, they instantly grab the bowl like that. And that's what I want to see. That's so, without even me talking to them about shape and design, that's what they do instantly. Nice little rim there, just around my thumb width in size. Sometimes it's a little bit bigger for bigger bowls because it just sort of captures the food more. It puts a frame around the food, but normally my thumbnail width is the rim. When it comes to shape as well, I know I've spoken about it before, but this is called the golden ratio. I believe there's a company, someone put it in the comments for everyone, or there's a company, a wood turning company making these now for wood turners, but that is the diameter of the bowl, as you can see there. And now that there should be the shape of my foot, the width of my foot. And hopefully, I haven't taken the tenon off yet, but that there will be the foot at the end of it. And I did that by eye, not tooting my own horn or anything like that. Like, that's just, when you do it, when you're making heaps of bowls, you just get used to it. Just like if someone makes boxes all the time, they just get so used to making boxes that they could do it with their eyes closed, and they just get so efficient at that shape. Tenons. I always turn my bowls with tenons on them. So all these big bowls over here, even these smaller bowls have tenons, and I turn tenons instead of mortises because I learned this off Glenn Lucas. Tenons are stronger in contraction than expansion, and it totally makes sense. You can push so much air into a balloon. Hopefully this is going to make sense. You can push so much air into a balloon before it pops, right? But if, for example, if you wear a belt, you can really put some force behind that belt to do it up. You know, that's talking about myself. But you can really squeeze something down instead of trying to put something in and then opening it up. It's weaker that way. Like putting an axe through timber, it'll split it. I don't know, when you've turned a platter before and you've probably seen me do it before. I get down here like this and I'm listening just before, because I don't want to crack, because it's forcing the fibers apart. So that's mortises and tenons. Multiple tools. The reason why I have so many bowl gouges up there is 19mm bowl gouges. So the big guys, they are the workhorse, 55-degree bevel. They take care of a lot of the timber, removing it, shaping it up, and getting it ready to go. Whereas the 45 and 16mm bowl gouges, they allow those, and 1/2 inch, they allow those, so 12mm bowl gouge, they allow those really nice finishing crisp cuts. Like I said in the previous video, it's got that shorter bevel, creating less vibration and chatter, less contact or lag with the timber. And yes, safety for the workshop. I've made a full video about all my safety gear in the workshop, but one really big thing, for those that missed the last video, I smelt a smouldering smell, like a burning smell coming across the workshop. And luckily, I was here at the time, because otherwise it would have started a fire. And the 3M VersaFlow is my pride and joy. So when it cost a lot of money to fix. But since then, I had some tricky nights sleep knowing that happened. And if I wasn't here, that could have gone real bad, could have gone really south. And I have heard of wood turners, their workshops going up in flames. And at the moment, because I have been turning, there is sawdust, and particularly camphor laurel. It's got a heap of oils in it. This workshop's got timber everywhere. It's got oils all over the back. It's got thinners, so highly flammable substances. So since then, I've gone out and put a smoke detector in the workshop, one of those U-Butte ones where it's got that photo thing where it can pick up. I've got a fire blanket and a fire extinguisher as well. So for anyone out there, I'm not kidding. I thought I would never cut my finger off, and I thought that stuff would never happen to me, but it's possible. So just take care of yourselves and the ones around you as well. Invest in something that you can put the fire out and you can at least detect it. And I know that a lot of people have shops in their workshops, in their garages. They've got a workshop in their garage. So just take the time to put a smoke alarm in there or something like that, so you can sleep easy at night, knowing if something, you put a battery on charge, because that's as simple as what it was for me. I had the battery on charge and I was over here, but luckily I was here and I could smell it burning. Don't put yourself in that compromising position that I tend to put myself in, is what I'm saying. Don't do what I did. I can laugh about it, but holy crap, if I wasn't here, it would have been very bad. Anyway, I think we're looking good here. Yes, we're good to go. So this first coat has soaked in just nicely, and I'm just going to give it a light top up, just ever so lightly, around the bowl like so. Really light get my 600 grit wet and dry sandpaper. Righto, so I'm going to turn the lathe speed down. We can see a bit of a run there, so I'm just going to wipe that out. We don't need that much. Lathe speed's down. Hold my hand over the sandpaper like so. Apologies about the fingernails. And now I've been wet sanding the rest of these bowls and it's been working out alright. But just building up that little bit of slurry has been taking a little bit of time. And now I don't wet sand with 320 grit sandpaper to start with. You can. I mean, there's no reason why you can't. Simply because unless you follow up with like a 600 grit wet and dry sandpaper, because in the past what I've noticed is that the 320 grit, if you stop there, it'll leave lines. But if you sand with the 600 grit, or work up to it at least, see I'm looking for this slurry just here, see the slurry there? That's what we want right there. That there is what we're chasing. So keep working that. But I want that at the front because what that does, as you're probably aware, it acts like an abrasive paste and it helps really work the oil in, but it cuts super fine. It helps the abrasive cut really nicely. Cool. Oop, put that back down there. Now I get my little buffing rag. Normally I use flannelette, but I don't have any flannelette at the moment, so I'm just going to fold that over. Little pincher method again. I'm just going to sand, oh, I'm just going to buff this oil in and just remove any of that excess. Come around the side. And it's a bit like a dance. You can see me moving around here with the bowl. You want to just work with it. Let the lathe do the work. And you've just got to hold on, and I've just got medium pressure on that. All right. So that is the first coat, and now I'm going to show you how to do the second coat. So you put that aside somewhere. If you've got those air drying racks, you might have seen them in like cold rooms and things like that. You can put the bowl up like that because the air can get to it. But I typically just put the bowl on the table or in my other shed, just like on its little foot there, and the air can get all around it. And to be honest, and I'm not just pulling or tooting my own horn here, but I can't see any railway lines in that whatsoever. No scratch marks, nothing. So that's what I'm after. Put that aside. Now I'm going to pick up my second bowl. So I'm going to add a finish to this bowl here. The second finish. No, these all had 2 coats. I did remember. So these have all had 2 coats of oil on them now, and now I'm going to put a third coat on. With the first coat, you'll realise after like 24, 48 hours or so, or however long it takes that oil to dry, and you'll know if it's dry. Just come up to it with, obviously dry hands and rub your hand over it, and you can feel if it's dry or not. You can also see if it looks dry. You'll see if it's still quite dark in colour, that the grain has really soaked it up and it still hasn't lightened up a bit. I have heard of some people, and I'll talk about the safety stuff to do with this in a minute. I have heard, and I don't recommend this, that some people leave their rag in a safe spot outside their workshop somewhere, and then they wait for the rag, once it's stretched out, to dry. And when they know that the rag's dry, then they know that the timber's dry. But I've never done that. I've just gone by the timber, by the actual bowl that I'm applying the oil to. So first thing you want to do when it comes to your second and third coat is get some steel wool, and this is the quadruple grade steel wool, so the real fine stuff. You don't have to use steel wool. There's also synthetic steel wool out there now as well. Be very careful with steel wool because hold the battery up to that and it will go up. It will ignite. I just fold it over, got my lathe here, and I just turn the lathe speed down and just knock the raised grain off. So I'm saying if this was the second coat, because the first coat will raise that grain. I don't know if you've seen woodworkers, they spray water over chopping boards or whatever they're doing, and that just soaks up the grain. The grain soaks that water up, and the little hairs, the little fibres of the grain stand up. So I'm just knocking that down with the steel wool. I haven't used that synthetic stuff before, but if anyone else has, just throw it in the comments there. So if anyone's interested, they can read your comment and then we can all learn together. So that's what I do there. And that is silky smooth, hey, that is beautiful. And you know, when you see the bowl, like just, you know, you put a lot of love into it, and a lot of thought about the shape, and it just starts coming together in the end. And it just really, it sinks in how much, it shows, I reckon, how much you love what you do, you know? Because it's not just turning a bowl. This is going to go to someone's home where they're going to sit around the dinner table and they're going to enjoy a meal out of this for years and years to come. It's not just a bowl. It's going to help people out, you know, they're going to feel proud about it when they put it on the table, you know, especially if they know you, or if, you know, they follow you and what you do, or, you know, because these aren't cheap to buy. So when they buy it, they take care of it. So it just makes me feel really good about what we do as wood turners, and I love it. Nothing better, I reckon. That's how I feel. Let that oil sit in there for a little bit and let it soak up. Sorry about swearing, let that oil sit in there, let it soak up right up into those fibres, and we're just going to let it chill there for a little bit. When it comes to when I sell these bowls, Woodcut Tools are now making these little tins that they suggested that another professional wood turner also uses or sells a bowl with a beeswax oil as well. So they gave me a heap of these. So when I sell bowls in the future, I'm going to provide a little beeswax, little remedy kit. So if it does start to dull in colour, they can fix it up at home. That brings me to another point about why I like to use oils. Oils, in my opinion, give a nice, broad, even consistent coat to your products that you sell or the products that you make. When it comes to a bowl this size and you're trying to use a shellac or something like that, it's quite hard to get a nice, really even coverage. It can be done, but to get that even coverage and to build it up to a nice, beautiful shine can be a bit tricky. So oils are a lot easier to use. They provide that even, consistent coat, and you know, you can wet sand them to bring up the end product, to bring that level up higher of finish. And you can also then go and apply a beeswax or a wax finish to the product. And the most important thing is the end user, so that family that you've just sold your bowl to or your platter to or whatever, they can then fix that at home, and you've empowered that customer, you've empowered that person in their home. So the bowl's gone a bit dull and you know, they just paid $250 for it. You've given them a product, not trying to push this, I'm just saying, for example, you've given them just an oil finished bowl, that is a good thing, that they can then fix up in their home, and that empowers them that they can then fix their own things as well. So for me, that's just another big tick in the box. So when they can sort their own products out at home and fix things, it gives them a sense of pride, and it makes them want to take care of your piece even more because they can fix it. I don't know if anyone has had steak knives before and the wooden handles on your knives or whatever you use, your cutlery, and you've put a bit of beeswax on it and you've left it out overnight on the paper towel, and you come back in the next morning, someone goes, "Oh, these look like new," and you know that you did that. It's just such a great feeling. So that's what you're doing for your customer. Getting a bit emotional in this video, aren't I? Holy dooly. Once that's done, let's buff it off real lightly. Buff any of that excess oil off, which wasn't. You'll notice you obviously use less and less as time goes on. And once that's done, I then get the bowl, use my other rag, and then I remove the bowl with the other rag. So then you're not having to put your fingers on it, because I don't know if you're like me, when you oil or wet sanding, oil just ends up everywhere. And then you go and touch something else and there's oil on it. Very annoying. That brings me to another point. When it comes to your rags, when it comes to your sandpaper, I have a little towel here that I use for that purpose of when I touch everything. I try to avoid that, so I wipe my hands on the towel. I then take that all outside the shop and put that into a water bucket, or especially the oil rags and stuff, put that in an oil bucket. I don't leave it in the workshop because I've heard of horror stories of oiled rags self-combusting or just lighting themselves, like burning, getting really hot, and they catch fire. So you want to avoid that at all costs, because like I said earlier, I didn't think that would happen to me. So I'm now taking every precaution that I can to avoid little things from happening that have devastating effects. Another thing as well that I forgot to mention is this guy here on the back of my chuck, just here. So when you're spinning in reverse, it prevents the chuck from spinning off. I'm not too sure if there's an aftermarket brand out there, but these came with my Vicmark VL 240. They normally sit on the little hand wheel around the back here. So that sits on the spindle and does up and around the back of the chuck. So when you're spinning in reverse, it won't come off. If you don't have one of them, when you do put your chuck on, just give it a flick at the end. You might have seen me do that in other videos before. Alrighty, so if you're interested in learning a lot more about wet sanding with Danish oil as well, because that creates a really hard watertight finish and also acts as a little blemish hider as well, check this video out here. If you want to learn more about sanding in particular, check that video out just there. But thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you, and thanks for spending your time watching this video. So cheers. I'll talk to you all directly. Bye.